20 years ago, when I started getting interested in decentralization, I started with a basic observation that there had been already 40 years of development assistance going on, and development assistance was channeled either through ministries or through NGOs and grassroots organizations. And that in that process, what has been skipped was the level of local governments and local authorities, which is where state and civil society join each other and can start a dialogue. So I thought it was important that there be a switch, and that at least a part of development assistance be channeled directly to the local authorities. So what is the price that we have paid for not doing that? Two types of cost. This double channels of national line ministries and grassroots organizations have imposed on development in general. First, a democratic cost, because clearly, why should people invest politically in their local governments? Why should they want them to be accountable to them if those local governments have nothing to offer? If whatever people get it either from a cent in paradise, which is in the capital city, or a cent in the stratosphere, which is in the European capitals, why would they invest politically in their own local government? So we have not done a favor to democracy by skipping the local authorities. But my focus was not so much on this kind of deficit, but on the other, on the second type of deficit, which was the ignorance of local development, or simply the marginalization of local development from the development discourse in general.
Here I'm taking the African perspective. I think part of what I will be saying is shared by other regions, but my experience comes from the African perspective. For 20 years, from 1980 to 2000, we had a vacuum of the territories in Africa, meaning the structural adjustment policies only privileged the office of the Minister of Finance and sometimes the harbor, the port, to agree on the external financial relations of the country and the ability to repay debt. So, for me, the high risk of the African countries was their disappearance as countries, as territories. And this created a lot of problems compared to what we witnessed in the 60s. Remember, in the 60s, people were saying, we want to develop all part of our national territory. So the involvement of people that live in every part of the country in the policies of the leadership was a concern. And planning ahead to better the lives and to link all parts of the countries was also a concern. Come the 90s, the only concern was I'm a darling of the IMF or the World Bank. So the concern was to please the external people and forget totally about their own people. And this is where people began to say, no, we are sorry we exist, and we need, first of all, democracy to express our voice, and secondly, decentralization to have our voice heard from where we are living. So this trend toward decentralization that people presented as a prerequisite from the donors is not true. People demanded decentralization. Oh, okay. Now, they were given a certain type of decentralization, as they were given a certain type of democratization. And this was enough for the community of states worldwide, even if it just was an image, like I used to say, a Canada Dry decentralization. It have the color of the decentralization, it have the image of decentralization. It can even taste a bit as decentralization, but it is not decentralization. So it seems decentralization is stalling in many countries. And from the viewpoint of a donor, this stop of the decentralization dynamic is seen as a lack of will of the politician or the political leadership in these countries. But don't forget, decentralization is about a fight for a better balanced power in the public arena. So the stalemate of decentralization should be seen as a very difficult fighting moment for the all segment of society to find their way in divided interests. So what you see as a stop is, to the contrary, a huge arena of fight to give birth to another social contract. People that are poor can lose and be sidelined, or they can win and be improved in the arena. So my question, my feeling is that the burning issue here is how democracy and local democracy will prevail or not.
What usually scares me the most is the fact that people have unrealistic hopes about decentralization. They think that if we somehow put in a magical formula to send money, that things will suddenly improve in the lives of thousands of communities and hundreds of cities and villages. Because somehow the money will arrive from somewhere. Usually there is no recognition that the most stable, strongest, and long-living decentralization is self-funded. That you need to get your own money together on priorities that you agree with to get things done.
First of all, let's forget about decentralization as a way to foster development. Decentralization reforms worldwide have not been initiated to foster development. Decentralization reforms have been driven by political motives, by political interests, not by developmental goals. That should be the really the starting point. If we believe the rhetorics, we will go nowhere. Okay? So let's not believe the rhetoric. Let's face the reality. Decentralization reforms are initiated by usually political parties, presidents, prime ministers, strong men of all sorts, shapes, and types. And the objective is to legitimize the coalition in power, to provide a stronger political basis to the coalition in power. So it's not surprising that we end up in that particular stalling of the reform process, which Jean-Pierre was talking about a minute ago. Why? Because once you achieve the political objectives of the reforms, you lose interest in the administrative and fiscal aspects of it, and don't proceed. That is what we see worldwide. I have often referred to this as the frozen decentralization processes worldwide. Decentralization reforms are frozen because they have accomplished the political objectives where they have been implemented, and the parties in power have no interest in proceeding further in terms of fiscal and administrative reforms. How do we engage with those situations? If we tell them that decentralization is political, fiscal, and administrative, it won't work. If we provide them with a normative image of what decentralization reform should be, it won't work. It won't work simply because it's not, we are threatening them by pushing them down the line of the fiscal and the administrative reforms. They like us to provide the rhetorical coverage of the first phase. But when we go into the second or third phase, they are no longer friends, because we are now threatening them. We are no longer helping them. Jean-Pierre referred to this stalling as an opportunity, not only as a difficulty. And I agree with that, with a caveat. And the caveat is that we have to be able to find the opportunities in that. It's not evident. They are not, without a proper political economy analysis of what has been driving politically the reforms, and of what are the bureaucratic resistances that have developed. Remember, the bureaucracy has never been at the forefront, has never been initiating decentralization reforms. Are the politicians who initiate decentralization. Usually the bureaucracy, the ministries and so on resist. So there is also an analysis of that resistance to be made. So we have to look at these opportunities, but they are not evident. However, do they exist? And I want to quote some words of encouragement that Douglas North wrote when in his seminal paper on the difference between natural states and open access states. He says, The changes in institutions, organization, and behavior that occur during the transition must be explained, so decentralization reforms must be explained as intentional acts consistent with the interest of the dominant coalition, but the results of those changes need not be consistent with their intentions. And that is where we have the opening. That is why we are into that business, okay? The problem is that we have to find that space.
I'm very, very interested in what I'm hearing around the table because it takes a paradigm saying that the leaders are interested in the relation with the citizen. This is the paradigm that you are sharing, all of you. But I take countries in my continent where the leaders have nothing to do with the citizen. I don't need to cite any country, but take a country where most of the budget comes from oil exploitation, from mining or for forestry. The only people that care for this guy is those who buy their commodities and the mines. And the citizens even are praying to him to have a sort of a little bit of what he gets from outside. So fiscal means nothing for this kind of leaders. And in that case, the fight is controlling. How do you control the way the wealth that is produced in my country is shared by the majority of people? And it doesn't go into a dependency. For example, here in this country, if the citizen of Belgium decide not to pay the taxes, the government collapse immediately. Not in these countries that I'm citing you, because they don't have any relations with their citizens in terms of dependency in tax base or tax paying. So it is very critical, and part of you are intervening in these kind of countries, and you are having a discourse on responsibility, ownership, and the alike. This is bullshit for the leaders. They don't consider it at all. They say keep talking. Because the reality is that they have the bulk of the money in their hands and they don't care about the citizen. So this is why decentralization is so key.